A charter school is a publicly funded, privately run school that operates a little bit differently from traditional public schools. Typically, with local public schools, the district makes decisions about what students learn and what types of policies and practices play out in schools. A charter school operates differently. A charter school begins when the would-be leaders of the school submit an application to a charter school authorizer. Who can authorize charter schools varies from state to state, as does a lot of the details about charter schools. And if the authorizer wants to approve the application, they can create a contract or a charter with the leaders of that school that say what the school needs to do in order to remain open. At the core of the charter school idea are three principles: autonomy, accountability, and choice. There's sometimes said to be a charter school bargain, where school leaders accept greater accountability in exchange for greater autonomy. They're held accountable for outcomes where, if schools don't meet those outcomes, authorizers can close down a charter school. In exchange, the leaders of charter schools have autonomy. They have the ability to do things that leaders of traditional public schools can't do. The third principle at the foundation of charter schools is choice. Parents choose which charter schools their kids attend, which is different from how assignment works for traditional public schools, where students are assigned to a school based on where they live. In their early days, charter schools enjoyed broad and unusual political coalitions. Political conservatives liked the idea of bringing market principles into education, with potential for efficiency from the competition that charter schools would introduce to traditional public schools. Progressives liked the idea that choice wouldn't just be for families that could afford to choose wherever they wanted to live or pay for private school tuition, but instead all families would have some say over which schools their kids attended. Even some teachers' unions liked the idea of charter schools because they thought teachers might have more say in how they operate. Over time, the politics of charter schools have changed. Teachers' unions have become skeptical that teachers actually have more control in charter schools than they do in traditional public schools. Others dislike that charter schools attract public funding, or that for-profit organizations can run schools, or they worry about a lack of transparency. Some of this partisan splintering happened before the 2016 election, but many think that the election of Donald Trump and his subsequent selection of Betsy DeVos as Secretary of Education have only led to further divisions in what people think about charter schools. Trump and DeVos have become the most visible supporters of charter schools and also harsh critics of the traditional public school system, which has further caused division across Republicans and Democrats in what they think about charter schools. For all of the attention and controversy that charter schools have attracted, it's still only about 6% of U.S. public school students that attend a charter school. Now, that percentage varies quite a bit across different subgroups of students in different areas. For example, more than 10% of Black public school students and 7% of Hispanic public school students attend a charter school, compared to only about 4% of white students. In many cities around the country, a majority or near majority of students attend charter schools. In Detroit and Washington, D.C., for example, that's right around 50%. The question of whether charter schools are successful is complicated. In order to evaluate their success, we need to have a good sense of what goals we have for charter schools and good measures of how well they serve those goals. It's not clear that we have either one. The goals of charter schools are broad. We hope that charter schools will perform well for their students, that they'll lead traditional public schools to perform better, that they'll come up with new ideas that public schools can adopt, and that they'll create opportunities for students to choose who otherwise might not have choices. Most of the research we have on how charter schools perform compares the test scores of students in charter schools to similar-looking students in traditional public schools. On the whole, those comparisons tend to show that charter school students perform about the same, at least in math and reading, as students in district schools. Under the surface, though, the story is a little more complicated. Students in urban charter schools tend to outperform their peers. Students in other charter schools tend to perform worse, and in some cases much worse, with, for example, online charter schools. But we should ask ourselves a bigger question about that research, which is whether that's the right question to ask in the first place. If part of the goal of charter schools is to make all schools improve, charter or district, then comparisons of charter and district schools might miss the point. We also care about a whole lot more than test scores and math and reading. Whether charters are teaching students to become better citizens and better people and all of the other things we want from our school systems is a question that we don't have good answers to yet from research. When presidential candidates talk about charter schools, it's more about principle and politics than it is about policy. Most consequential decisions made about charter schools happen at the state and local levels. The federal government does play a role. The Department of Education administers the Charter Schools program, which provides funds to charter schools to start up, acquire facilities, and replicate. In 2019, Congress allotted $440 million to the Charter Schools program, a figure that has increased substantially during the Trump administration. Federal policymakers could increase or decrease overall funding for the charter schools program and add or remove stipulations for that funding, for example, related to whether for-profit charter schools and online charter schools can access those funds. To learn more about this and other issues, check out our voter vitals at brookings.edu/policy2020.